The Kansas City sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows across the practice field. But nobody was paying attention to the weather. Thousands of eyes were fixed on a single moment unfolding on the emerald grass below. A small boy, wearing a football helmet that seemed almost comically oversized for his fragile frame, sat perched on the broad shoulders of Travis Kelce, the NFL superstar who had become a household name across America. The child's smile was radiant, pure, and unfiltered, the kind of joy that seemed to illuminate not just his own face, but the entire stadium around him. His thin legs dangled on either side of Kelce's neck, and his small hands gripped the player's jersey with the determination of someone who never wanted the moment to end. The crowd was on its feet, cheering and applauding, their voices creating a symphony of celebration that echoed off the stadium walls. Callum Renshaw had waited his entire short life for this moment. At just 8 years old, he had already faced more challenges than most people encounter in a lifetime. But right now, sitting on top of the world in the form of his football hero, none of that seemed to matter. The pain, the treatments, the sleepless nights filled with worry, all of it faded into the background as he experienced something he had only dared to dream about. Travis Kelce jogged slowly around the field, his powerful stride steady and sure, carrying his precious cargo with the care of someone who understood the weight of the moment. The crowd's energy was infectious, building with each step, creating an atmosphere that felt almost electric. Cameras flashed from every corner of the stadium, capturing what everyone present knew was something special, something that would be remembered long after the game statistics were forgotten. But then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, everything changed. The boy's laughter, which had been ringing out clear and bright across the field, suddenly stopped. His small hands, which had been waving enthusiastically to the crowd, slowly moved to grip Travis Kelce's head more tightly. The smile that had lit up his face just moments before began to fade, replaced by an expression that made every parent in the stadium hold their breath. The crowd's cheering gradually died down as people began to notice that something was different. The joyful energy that had filled the air just seconds earlier was slowly being replaced by something else entirely, a collective sense of concern that spread through the stadium like ripples on a pond. Travis Kelce, still carrying the boy on his shoulders, seemed to sense the change immediately. His steady jog slowed to a walk, then to a complete stop in the middle of the field. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of traffic beyond the stadium walls and the gentle flutter of flags in the Kansas breeze. What happened next would leave everyone present questioning everything they thought they knew of courage, hope, and the power of human connection. In that moment of sudden quiet, with thousands of people watching and holding their breath, something extraordinary was about to unfold that would touch hearts far beyond the boundaries of that football field. The boy's mother, Imogen Thayer, stood frozen on the sideline, her hand pressed to her mouth, watching her son with the same mixture of love and terror that had become her constant companion since his diagnosis. Wesley Drohan, the foundation volunteer who had made this dream possible, felt his stomach drop as he realized that the perfect day he had orchestrated was about to take an unexpected turn. And Travis Kelce, the man who had signed up to give a sick child a few hours of happiness, found himself at the center of a moment that would change not just the boy's life, but his own understanding of what it truly meant to be a hero. The silence stretched on, heavy with anticipation and fear, as everyone waited to see what would happen next in this story that had started with such joy and promise. The morning had started with nervous energy and careful preparation. Callum Renshaw stood in front of his bedroom mirror, wearing his Kansas City Chiefs jersey for what felt like the 100th time. But today was different. Today wasn't about watching the game on television or pretending to be his hero in the backyard. Today, he was actually going to meet Travis Kelce, the player whose poster hung on his wall, whose statistics he had memorized, whose touchdown celebrations he practiced when no one was looking. His mother, Imogen Thayer, watched from the doorway as her son tried to fix his hair for the third time, his thin fingers working through the strands that had grown back thicker and curlier after his last round of treatment. She remembered when he had first lost his hair, how he had cried not because of the pain or the illness, but because he was afraid Travis Kelce wouldn't recognize him without his normal hair. The innocence of that concern had broken her heart then, just as watching him now, so full of hope and excitement, made her chest tight with a mixture of joy and the ever-present undercurrent of fear that had become her constant companion. "Do I look okay, Mum?" Callum asked, turning to face her with an expression so earnest it made her want to gather him in her arms and never let him go. He had been calling her Mum instead of Mama lately, insisting that he was getting too old for baby names. Another small reminder that he was growing up faster than she had ever imagined possible. "You look absolutely perfect," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overflow. "Travis Kelce is going to be so impressed with how handsome and brave his biggest fan is." The ride to the practice facility felt like both an eternity and an instant. Callum pressed his face to the window, watching the familiar streets of Kansas City roll by. But everything looked different through the lens of anticipation. The buildings seemed taller, the sky seemed bluer, and the world seemed full of possibilities that had felt out of reach just a few months ago, when the doctors had first started using words like terminal and palliative care in their hushed conversations with his mother. Wesley Drohan was waiting for them at the main entrance to the training facility, his warm smile and genuine enthusiasm immediately putting both Callum and his mother at ease. Wesley had been working with the foundation for over 5 years, helping to arrange meet and greets between professional athletes and children facing serious illness. But there was something about this particular case that had touched him deeply. Maybe it was the way Callum's eyes had lit up during their phone conversation when he talked about Travis Kelce, or maybe it was the quiet strength he had heard in his mother's voice as she described her son's battle with a courage that seemed far too mature for his 8 years. "Are you ready for the best day ever?" Wesley asked, kneeling down to Callum's eye level, a gesture that immediately endeared him to Imogen, who had grown tired of adults who spoke to her son as if his illness had somehow made him less capable of normal interaction. Callum nodded enthusiastically, clutching a small football that he had brought to ask Travis to sign. It was the same football his father had given him before he had to move away for work, back when the family was still whole and the future still seemed predictable. Now it represented one of his most treasured possessions, and the thought of having his hero's signature on it felt like the ultimate validation of his dream. The practice facility was buzzing with activity as players arrived for their afternoon training session. The sound of cleats on concrete echoed through the corridors, mixed with the easy laughter and casual conversation of professional athletes going about their daily routine. For Callum, it felt like stepping into a different world, one where his heroes weren't just images on a screen, but real people with real voices and real presence. Travis Kelce appeared around the corner with the kind of natural confidence that had made him a star, both on and off the field. He was taller than Callum had imagined, his presence somehow both larger than life and completely approachable at the same time. When he spotted the small group waiting for him, his face broke into a genuine smile that immediately put everyone at ease. "You must be Callum," Travis said, walking directly toward the boy with his hand extended for a shake. "I've been hearing a lot about you, man. They tell me you're one of my biggest fans." Callum's response was barely above a whisper, his earlier confidence suddenly replaced by the overwhelming reality of meeting his idol face to face. "Yes, sir. I watch all your games, even the ones where you don't catch very many passes." Travis laughed, a rich sound that filled the corridor and seemed to dissolve the last of Callum's nervousness. "Well, I appreciate your loyalty, especially during those rough games. That means more to me than you know." From a large equipment bag, Travis pulled out a jersey with Callum's name and his own number stitched across the back. The craftsmanship was perfect, clearly a custom piece made specifically for this occasion, and Callum's eyes widened as he took in every detail of what was obvious, an official team jersey. "This is for you," Travis said, holding up the jersey so Callum could see his name in bold letters. "I figured you might want to wear the real thing we head out to the practice. What do you think?" Callum looked up at his mother, his expression a mixture of disbelief and pure joy. When she nodded her permission, he carefully took the jersey from Travis's hand, running his fingers over the fabric as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. "Can I put it on now?" he asked, his voice filled with the kind of excitement that reminded everyone present why they had all worked so hard to make this day possible. "Absolutely," Travis replied. "In fact, I insist on it." We've got a lot of work to do today, and you're going to need to look the part." As Callum pulled the jersey over his head, transforming from a sick child into a member of the Kansas City Chiefs, at least in his own mind, Imogen felt tears threatening to spill over. This was what hope looked like, she realized. This was what it meant to give a child something to dream about, beyond hospital rooms and treatment schedule. Wesley watched the interaction with professional satisfaction tinged with personal emotion. He had seen hundreds of these meetings over the years, but there was something special about the connection he was witnessing between Travis and Callum. It felt genuine in a way that went beyond the usual charitable obligations that most athletes fulfilled with grace, but also with a certain emotional distance. "So, are you ready to see what it's like to be a real Kansas City Chief?" Travis asked, adjusting the jersey so it fit better on Callum's small frame. The boy nodded so enthusiastically that everyone laughed, and as they walked toward the practice field, Callum reached up and took Travis's hand with the natural trust of a child who had found exactly what he had been hoping for. The practice field stretched out before them like a green ocean, marked with the precise white lines that had become as familiar to Travis as the rooms of his own house, but seeing it through Callum's eyes made it feel magical again. The boy stood at the edge of the field, his new jersey hanging loose his thin frame, taking in every detail with the wide-eyed wonder of someone experiencing something he had only seen on television. "It's so much bigger than it looks on TV," Callum whispered, his voice filled with awe as he watched other players running drills in the distance. The sound of footballs being caught, the sharp whistle blasts from coaches, and the rhythmic thud of cleats on turf created a symphony that spoke to every football fan's deepest dream. Travis knelt down beside him, following his gaze across the field. "You know what? I thought the same thing the first time I stepped onto a professional field. It's like the whole world opens up when you're standing on that grass." Several other players had gathered around, drawn by curiosity about their young visitor. Travis made introductions with the easy camaraderie of a veteran player who understood the importance of making everyone feel welcome. Each player took a moment to shake Callum's hand, sign his football, and share a few words that made the boy's smile grow wider with each interaction. "Hey, Callum," Travis said, pulling a pair of gloves from his equipment bag. "These are my practice gloves. Think you might want to try catching a few passes?" The boy's eyes went wide. "Really? You'd let me use your actual gloves?" "Partner, these gloves are about to become your gloves," Travis replied, helping Callum slide them on. They were comically oversized for his small hand. He held them up proudly, flexing his fingers as if testing out superpower. What started as a simple game of catch quickly evolved into something more elaborate. Travis began with easy tosses, just a few feet apart, letting Callum get used to the weight and feel of a real NFL football. But as the boys' confidence grew, so did the complexity of their play. Soon, Travis was calling out simple routes, and Callum was running them with the serious concentration of a player preparing for the Super Bowl. "Go out about 10 steps and turn around," Travis called out, taking the stance of a quarterback preparing to throw. Callum nodded seriously and began his route, counting his steps carefully and making a sharp turn that would have made any coach proud. The football sailed through the air in a perfect spiral, and Callum's hands came up instinctively to make the catch. When the ball settled securely in his arms, the small group of players and staff who had gathered to watch erupted in cheered applause. Callum's face lit up with a joy so pure it seemed to make the Kansas City sunshine brighter. "Did you see that, Mum?" he called out to Imogen, who was watching from the sideline, tears streaming down her face. "I caught a real pass from Travis Kelce." "I saw it, sweetheart," she called back, her voice thick with emotion. "You looked like a real professional out there." As their impromptu practice session continued, other team members began to gather. What had started as a simple meet and greet was organically transforming into something larger, a spontaneous celebration that drew everyone into its orbit. Someone brought out additional equipment, and soon Callum was wearing shoulder pads that had been adjusted to fit his small frame, a helmet that made him look like a bobblehead doll, and cleats that had been stuffed with padding to keep them from sliding off his feet. Wesley watched from the sideline, documenting everything with both his camera and his heart. He had coordinated hundreds of these visits, but rarely had he seen one evolve so naturally into something that felt less like charity and more like pure joy. The other players weren't going through the motions of being kind to a sick child. They were genuinely enjoying themselves, caught up in the infectious enthusiasm that Callum brought to every moment. Travis hoisted Callum up onto his shoulders, and the boys' laughter rang out across the practice field like church bells. From his elevated perch, Callum could see the entire facility, the city skyline in the distance, and the faces of his new friends looking up at him with genuine affection. For a moment, he wasn't a sick child being granted a wish. He was just a kid having the time of his life with his hero. "How does it look from up there?" Travis asked, jogging slowly around the field with his precious cargo. "Like I'm flying," Callum replied, spreading his arms wide and letting the wind catch his jersey. "Like I'm the king of football." The crowd that had gathered began to cheer, and Callum waved enthusiastically with both hands, his earlier shyness completely forgotten. He was performing now, feeding off the energy of the audience, becoming the star of his own show. Travis could feel the boy's excitement the way he bounced slightly on his shoulder, could hear it, the pure joy of his laughter. But then, as they reached the center of the field, Travis felt something change. The bouncing stopped first, then the laughter faded. Callum's hands, which had been waving confidently at the crowd, slowly moved to grip Travis's head more tightly. The weight on his shoulders seemed to shift, becoming less animated, more still. "You okay up there, buddy?" Travis asked, slowing his pace and keeping his voice light despite the concern that was beginning to build in his chest. "I'm fine," Callum replied, but his voice sounded different, smaller, more fragile. Can we stop for a minute?" Travis immediately came to a stop, standing perfectly still in the middle of the field as he tried to assess what was happening without alarming the boy or the crowd that was still watching expectantly. He could feel Callum's breathing against the top of his head, shallow and quick, and the grip of his small hands had become tighter, more desperate. The cheering from the crowd began to die down as people sensed that something had changed. The joyful energy that had filled the air just moments before was slowly being replaced by something else, a collective holding of breath as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Imogen was already moving from the sideline, her maternal instincts picking up on the change in her son's demeanor even from a distance. Wesley was close behind her, his mind racing through the medical protocols and emergency procedures that were always part of these events, hoping they wouldn't be needed, but knowing they were there if necessary. Travis remained perfectly still, a pillar of strength supporting the boy on his shoulder, waiting for some sign of what Callum needed in that moment. The football field, which had been filled with laughter and celebration just seconds before, had become a stage where something much more profound was about to unfold. The silence stretched out, heavy with anticipation and concern, as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Travis Kelce had been in high-pressure situations before, fourth-down conversions in playoff games, last-second touchdowns with millions watching, moments where the outcome of entire seasons hung in the balance. But standing in the middle of that practice field with Callum Renshaw on his shoulder, feeling the boy's small hands trembling slightly against his head, he experienced a different kind of pressure entirely. This wasn't about winning or losing again. This was about a child's well-being, and the weight of that responsibility felt heavier than any football he had ever carried. "Take your time, buddy," Travis said softly, his voice carrying only to the boy above him. "We don't have to do anything you don't want to do." Callum's breathing was shallow but steady, and Travis could feel the effort the boy was making to compose himself. Around them, the crowd had fallen into a respectful silence, sensing that something important was happening even if they couldn't quite understand what it was. The other players maintained their position, ready to help, but unsure of what kind of help might be needed. "I don't want to get down," Callum said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything got really bright for a second, and I felt dizzy." Imogen had reached the edge of the field, her face pale with worry, but Travis caught her eye and gave her a small nod that somehow communicated both reassurance and understanding. He had spent enough time around children to know that sometimes the best help was simply patience, giving them the space to work through whatever they were experiencing without making them feel like they were in trouble or causing problems. "That happens sometimes," Travis replied, his tone casual and matter-of-fact, "especially when you're up high and there's a lot of excitement. Want to know a secret? It happens to me too sometimes, during big games when there's a lot going on and all those lights are flashing." "Really?" Callum asked, and Travis could hear some of the tension leaving his voice. "Really?" The first time I played in a Monday night football game, with all those cameras and lights, I got so dizzy during warm-ups that I had to sit down for a few minutes. My teammates thought I was nervous, but really I just needed to let my head clear. Travis began walking again, but slower this time, with the measured pace of someone who understood that the destination was less important than the journey. Each step was deliberate and steady, designed to give Callum time to adjust and feel secure. The thing is, Travis continued, being up high gives you a better view, but it also means you have to take your time and really look at what's around you. No rushing, no hurrying, just taking in the whole picture. As they moved across the field, Travis pointed out different aspects of the facility that might not be visible from ground level. The way the yard markers were painted with perfect precision, the intricate patterns in the artificial turf, the positioning of the cameras that would capture every play during actual game. He turned what could have been a moment of medical concern into an educational tour, giving Callum something to focus on besides his own physical discomfort. Wesley approached carefully, staying within earshot, but not close enough to make Callum feel like he was being monitored. He had been through similar situations before, and he knew that the key was following the child's lead while being prepared for any eventuality. His phone was ready to call the medical staff, who were always on standby during these events, but for now, Travis seemed to have the situation well in hand. "You know what I think?" Travis said, as they reached the goal line. "I think you're one of the toughest players I've ever met. Most guys would have asked to get down by now, but you're still up there, still checking out the field, still being part of the team." "I am pretty tough," Callum agreed, and there was a note of pride in his voice that hadn't been there a few minutes earlier. "My mum says I'm the toughest kid she knows." "Your mum is absolutely right," Travis replied, "and I can tell just by the way you handle yourself. You've got that championship spirit." They had completed a slow circuit of the field, and Callum's breathing had returned to normal. The color had come back to his voice, and his grip on Travis's head had relaxed from desperate to merely secure. Whatever moment of difficulty he had experienced seemed to have passed, but Travis continued to move with the same careful attention, unwilling to take any chances with his precious cargo. "Travis?" Callum said as they approached the center of the field again. "Yeah, buddy. Can we do something really cool? Something that would make all those people in the stands cheer really loud?" Travis smiled, feeling the return of the boy's enthusiasm like sunshine breaking through clouds. "What did you have in mind? Can you run with me on your shoulders? Like, really run? And can I hold my arms out like I'm flying?" The request was simple, but Travis understood the significance behind it. Callum wasn't asking to be protected or treated carefully. He was asking to feel powerful, to experience the kind of moment that would stay with him forever, regardless of what the future might hold. "You sure you're up for that?" Travis asked, wanting to give the boy every opportunity to change his mind or modify the plan. "I'm sure," Callum replied with conviction. "I want to feel what it's like to really fly." Travis looked around the field, calculating distances and considering options. The crowd was still watching, still waiting to see what would happen next in this unscripted drama that captured everyone's attention. He could see Imogen on the sideline, her hands clasped together in front of her chest, her face a mixture of worry and trust, as she watched her son make his own decisions about what he could and couldn't handle. "All right, then," Travis said, adjusting his grip to make sure Callum was secure. "But we do this together, as a team. You hold on tight when you need to, and you let me know if anything doesn't feel right." "Deal." "Deal," Callum agreed, and Travis could feel him straightening up on his shoulders, preparing for whatever was about to come. "On the count of 3, Travis said, backing up a few steps to give himself room to build momentum. 1, 2. The crowd seemed to sense that something spectacular was about to happen. People began to stand, phones came out to capture the moment, and a palpable energy filled the air as everyone waited to see what these two unlikely teammates were about to accomplish together. 3, Travis said, and everything changed. Travis Kelce took off across the field with the explosive power that had made him one of the most feared tight ends in the NFL. But his speed was tempered by the precious cargo on his shoulder. Callum's arms spread wide like the wings of an eagle, his small body perfectly balanced as Travis found his rhythm, each stride smooth and controlled, yet filled with the kind of athletic grace that made the difficult look effortless. The crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very foundations of the practice facility. What they were witnessing wasn't just an act of kindness, a charitable gesture. It was pure magic, a moment where the boundary between professional athletics and childhood dreams completely disappeared. Callum's laughter rang out above the noise, clear and bright, and filled with such unadulterated joy it seemed to lift everyone who heard it. "I'm flying!" Callum shouted, his voice carrying across the field, as Travis maintained his steady, "Mom, look, I'm really flying!" Imogen stood on the sideline with tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth, as she watched her son experience something that transcended every limitation his illness had placed on his young life. In that moment, he wasn't a sick child being granted. He was Superman. He was everything he had ever dreamed of being. Travis could feel Callum's absolute trust in every movement, the way the boy's body relaxed into the rhythm of the run, the confidence with which he held his arms outstretched. It was a reminder of what was possible when fear was replaced by faith, when limitation was replaced by imagination. The NFL star found himself running not just for Callum's benefit, but for his own, rediscovering the pure joy of movement and speed that had first drawn him to football as a child. Aubrey Kelm, the local reporter who had been assigned to cover the story, lowered her camera for a moment just to experience the scene with her own eyes. Had covered hundreds of sports stories, interviewed countless athletes, and witnessed numerous acts of community service. But there was something about this moment that felt different, more authentic, more profound than anything she had documented before. This wasn't just news. This was the kind of story that reminded people why they fell in love with sports in the first place. As Travis completed his first lap around the field, other players began to join them, running alongside in formation like an honor guard. They didn't speak or call out instruction. They simply matched Travis's pace and became part of the moment, understanding instinctively that they were participating in something special. The practice session that had been scheduled for that afternoon was forgotten, as the entire team became part of Callum's dream. Wesley watched from the sideline, his professional distance momentarily forgotten, as he found himself caught up in the emotional power of what was unfolding. He had facilitated thousands of interactions between athletes and children over the years, but rarely had he seen one that felt so genuine, so free from the artificial constraints that often surrounded charitable events. This wasn't about photo opportunity or public relations. This was about human connection in its purest form. "Faster!" Callum called out, his confidence growing with each stride. "I want to see how fast we can really go." Travis responded by gradually increasing his pace, still mindful of his passenger's safety, but willing to push the boundaries of what was possible. The wind caught Callum's jersey, making it billow behind him like a cape, and his laughter became even more pronounced as the speed increased. He was living out every childhood fantasy of flight, of speed, of being larger than life. The crowd's cheering reached a crescendo as Travis and his escort of teammates completed their second lap. People were on their feet, many of them crying openly as they witnessed something that spoke to the deepest parts of the human experience. This was about more than football. It was about hope, about the power of community, about the ways in which ordinary people could create extraordinary moments for each other. As they approached the center of the field, Travis began to slow his pace, bringing their flight to a gradual and gentle conclusion. Callum's arms remained outstretched for several more seconds before he finally brought them down and wrapped them around Travis's head in a hug that communicated everything words couldn't express. "That was the best thing that ever happened to me," Callum said, his voice still breathless with excitement. "I felt like I could do anything." "Oh, you can do anything," Travis replied, carefully lowering himself to one knee so that Callum could slide down from his shoulders. "Don't ever let anyone tell you different." But instead of letting Callum climb down, Travis had another idea. He reached up and carefully lifted the boy down in front of him, then did something that no one expected. He took off his own helmet, the one he wore during practice, the one that bore his number and his name, and placed it gently on Callum's head. The helmet was far too large, settling down over Callum's ears and nearly covering his eyes, but the symbolism of the gesture was unmistakable. In that simple act, Travis was passing something on, sharing not just a piece of equipment, but a piece of his identity, his success, achievement. Every champion needs the right equipment, Travis said, adjusting the helmet so Callum could see. And you, my friend, are definitely a champion. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. The cheering reached levels typically reserved for game-winning touchdowns. But this celebration was about something more important than any score. People were witnessing a moment of pure generosity, of connection, of one human being recognizing the worth and dignity of another in the most public and meaningful way possible. Callum looked up at Travis through the face mask of the helmet, his eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Is this really mine?" "It's really yours," Travis confirmed. "But there's one more thing we need to do to make it official." Travis stood up and raised Callum's small hand high above their head, the gesture of a champion being celebrated, of a victory being acknowledged. The boy in the oversized helmet and jersey, standing next to his hero in the middle of a professional football field, represented everything that was good about sport, about community, about the human capacity for kindness. The image would be captured by dozens of cameras, shared millions of times on social media, and remembered long after the statistics of that season were forgotten. But for the people present in that moment, the power wasn't in how it would be remembered, but in how it felt to witness something pure and beautiful happening in real time. The applause seemed to go on forever, wave after wave of appreciation washing over the field as the crowd remained on its feet, unwilling to let the moment end. Callum stood in the center of it all, Travis Kelce's helmet still perched on his small head, one hand raised in victory, while the other gripped Travis's jersey to keep himself steady. The smile on his face was radiant, the kind of pure joy that photographers spend their entire careers trying to capture. Imogen Thayer had moved from the sideline onto the field itself, drawn by the magnetic pull of watching her son experience something that seemed to transcend every limitation his illness had placed on his young life. When she reached them, Travis immediately stepped aside to give her space, understanding that this moment belonged to a mother and her child as much as it belonged to anyone. "How do I look, Mum?" Callum asked, adjusting the helmet with both hands and striking a pose that was equal parts adorable and heroic. "You look like exactly what you are," she replied, kneeling down to his level and fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her composure. "You look like a champion." Wesley Drohan approached the group with his camera ready, but he paused before taking any picture, understanding that sometimes the most important moments needed to be experienced before they could be documented. The foundation had strict protocols about media coverage and image rights, but those concerns seemed trivial in the face of what was happening in front of him. "Callum," Wesley said gently, "would it be okay if we took some pictures to help other kids know that dreams like this can come true?" The boy nodded enthusiastically, then looked up at Travis with an expression of concern. "Is it okay if I keep the helmet on for the pictures?" "Partner, I'd be disappointed if you took it off," Travis replied with a grin. "That helmet looks better on you than it ever looked on me." What followed was an impromptu photo session that felt more like a celebration than a media obligation. Callum posed with Travis, with his mother, with the other players who had joined their run around the field. But the most powerful images came when he was simply being himself, wearing equipment that was too big for him, but carrying himself with the confidence of someone who had just discovered that anything was possible. Aubrey Kelm, who had been documenting the entire experience, found herself struggling to maintain her professional objectivity. She had covered thousands of stories over her career, but rarely had she witnessed something that felt so authentic, so removed from the calculated public relations effort that usually surrounded celebrity charitable events. "This isn't just a feel-good story," she murmured to her cameraman as they captured footage of Callum teaching Travis one of his own touchdown celebrations. "This is something different. This is real." As the formal activities began to wind down, Travis pulled Callum aside for a private conversation. They sat together on the bench at the edge of the field, the boy still wearing the oversized helmet, his legs swinging freely as they talked. "I want you to know something," Travis said, his voice serious but warm. "What we did today, that wasn't just me doing something nice for you. You did something for me, too." Callum looked puzzled. "What did I do?" "You reminded me why I fell in love with football in the first place," Travis explained. "It wasn't about the money or the fame or any of that stuff. It was about this feeling, this pure joy of being on the field and sharing that with people who understand what it means." "I understand," Callum said solemnly. Football is about flying. Exactly, Travis agreed. It's about flying. And today, you flew better than anyone I've ever seen. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the rest of the team, who had spontaneously decided to present Callum with a football signed by every player. But this wasn't just any football. It was one that had been used in an actual game, complete with grass stains and scuff marks that told the story of real competition. This ball has been in the end zone, the team captain explained as he presented it to Callum. And now it belongs to someone who belongs in the end zone, too. Callum accepted the gift with the solemnity of someone receiving a sacred artifact, cradling the football against his chest, as if it were made of the most precious materials on earth. I'll take really good care of it, he promised. We know you will, the captain replied, and we want you to know that you'll always be part of this team. Anytime you want to come back and visit, anytime you want to throw some passes or just hang out, you've got a home here. The offer wasn't just ceremonial politeness. It was a genuine invitation backed by the kind of institutional support that made such promises meaningful. Wesley made a note to follow up with the team's community relations department to ensure that the invitation could be honored in whatever way worked best for Callum and his family. As the afternoon began to fade into evening, the crowd started to disperse, but many people lingered, reluctant to leave the scene of something they knew they would remember for the rest of their lives. Parents held their own children a little tighter. Athletes reconsidered what it meant to be role model, and everyone present carried with them a reminder of what was possible when compassion met opportunity. Callum's energy was finally beginning to flag, the excitement and physical activity of the day catching up with his small body in ways that reminded everyone of the medical realities that had brought them together in the first place. But there was no sadness in his fatigue, only the satisfied exhaustion of someone who had lived fully and completely in every moment. I think it might be time to head home, Imogen said gently, reading the signs in her son's posture and expression that others might have missed. Just 5 more minutes? Callum asked, employing the universal plea of children everywhere who weren't ready for good things to end. How about this? Travis suggested. What if we walked to the parking lot together, and you could wear the helmet all the way to your car? That way we get a few more minutes. You also get to rest your legs. It was the perfect compromise, allowing Callum to extend the experience while also acknowledging his physical needs. As they made their way across the facility, other staff members and players stopped what they were doing to wave goodbye, creating an impromptu receiving line of well-wishers. At the car, Travis helped Callum carefully remove the helmet, making sure the boy understood that it was truly his to keep. Remember, he said as he handed it over, this helmet has seen a lot of action, but it's never been worn by anyone as brave as you. Thank you for the best day of my whole life, Callum replied, then surprised everyone by initiating a hug that lasted long enough for both participants to memorize the moment. As the family prepared to leave, Aubrey Kelm approached for one final interview. Her questions were gentle, focused more on feelings than fact, designed to capture the emotional truth of what had transpired rather than simply documenting the event. Callum, what was your favorite part of today? She asked. The boy considered the question seriously before answering. Flying, he said simply, and learning that Travis Kelce is even better in real life than he is on TV. And what will you remember most? That some dreams are too big for just thinking about them, Callum replied, unconsciously echoing the sentiment that would become the story's lasting message. Sometimes you have to actually live them. As their car pulled away from the practice facility, Callum pressed his face to the rear window, watching the field grow smaller in the distance, but never quite disappearing. The helmet sat beside him on the seat, along with his signed football and a bag full of other mementos from the day. But the real treasures from the afternoon couldn't be contained in any bag or displayed on any shelf. They lived in the memories of everyone who had been present, in the photographs that would be shared around the world, and in the story that would be told and retold wherever people gathered to discuss the power of human kindness. Travis Kelce stood in the parking lot long after the car had disappeared, still processing what had just occurred. He had participated in countless charity events over the years, had met hundreds of children facing various challenges, but something about his time with Callum felt different, more significant. His phone was already buzzing with messages from friends and family who had seen clips of the day's events on social media. The story was spreading rapidly, but Travis found himself caring less about the public response than about the private moments he had shared with a remarkable young boy who had reminded him of something essential about both football and life. Wesley Drohan was already planning his report to the foundation, knowing that this would become a case study in how these programs could transcend their basic mission and create something truly transformative. The success wouldn't be measured in media coverage or fundraising potential, but in the genuine connections that had been forged and the lives that had been touched. That evening, as news of the day's events spread across social media and television networks, the story resonated far beyond the world of sport. It became a reminder of what was possible when public figures used their platforms not just for self-promotion, but for genuine service to others. It demonstrated the power of treating every person, regardless of age or circumstance, with dignity and respect. But perhaps most importantly, it showed that some dreams really are too big to be contained within the boundaries of imagination. Sometimes, with the right combination of generosity, opportunity, and courage, those dreams can take flight and soar in ways that inspire everyone who witnesses their journey. In homes across the country, parents used Callum's story to teach their own children about bravery, about kindness, and about the importance of never giving up on the things that matter most. The boy who had spent one afternoon living his dream had inadvertently given countless others permission to believe in their own. And in a small house in Kansas City, a young boy fell asleep wearing a professional football helmet that was too big for his head, but exactly the right size for his dream, secure in the knowledge that he had experienced something that would live in his heart forever, regardless of what tomorrow might bring. The story that had begun with nervous excitement and careful preparation had evolved into something much larger than anyone had expected. It had become a testament to the power of human connection, a reminder that the most important victories don't always happen on scoreboards, and proof that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply the chance to feel, for however brief a moment, like anything is possible.